The door clicked softly behind us, and my chest fluttered with a kind of nervous anticipation I hadn't felt in years. He moved ahead of me with that slow, assured ease only a man who's lived through a few decades can carry. And then I became aware of the second presence just as close. I had only expected one of them to follow me in, but with both of them there, their attention settling on me from either side, I realized this night was about to stretch far beyond anything I'd imagined when I left my apartment. Before I tell you how everything unfolded, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more than you realize and makes sure you don't miss the next story when it comes. Not long before that night, I'd grown thoroughly exhausted by men my own age. Everything with them felt rushed. Quick messages, quick dates, quick assumptions. No patience. No listening. Sitting alone at a cafe that evening, stirring the melting ice in my glass, I caught myself wondering if anyone actually knew how to slow down and see me. Not just my body. Not just my photo. Me. That's when they walked in. Two men, both clearly in their 50s. Their clothes were put together, but not trying too hard. There was a quiet ease in the way they moved, like they had nothing to prove and all the time in the world. They didn't scan the room looking for validation. They simply stepped inside as if every space they entered would naturally adjust around them. An old thought slipped back into my mind, the one I'd been carrying for years and never dared to speak out loud. Maybe I needed someone older, someone whose pace matched the depth I craved. One of them caught my eye and, instead of looking away, held my gaze with a small, knowing lift of his glass. The other followed his lead, his smile already warm, as if he'd somehow been aware of my attention from across the room. My cheeks heated when I realized they were walking in my direction, their steps deliberate, unhurried, and they chose the two empty stools on either side of me. "You look like you're expecting someone," the first man said, his voice low, calm, and steady. "Or maybe you're hoping someone worth your time finally shows up." The second added, his grin easy but gentle. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. "Or maybe I'm just done with the wrong kind of company." And what's the right kind?" the first asked, leaning just close enough for me to catch the faint, refined scent of his cologne. "Someone who doesn't waste my time," I answered, surprised by how unfiltered my voice sounded. They traded a brief look between them, like two people arriving at the same quiet conclusion. "Experience usually teaches us that," the second murmured, his eyes still holding mine. The word experience lingered between us like a slow exhale. It was exactly what I'd been thinking, but hadn't dared say out loud. From there, the conversation seemed to unfold on its own. They teased me about my drink choice, and I teased them back about their unshakable calm. Neither talked over the other. Neither tried to dominate the spotlight. It felt as if they both preferred me right where I was. Between them, my voice at the center, their attention meeting around me like a circle that closed gently. "So tell me," the first asked after a while, eyes warm with curiosity, "what's someone like you doing here alone?" "Maybe I was waiting for you," I replied, half joking, half telling the truth. "Both of us." The second tilted his head, smile deepening. I bit my lip, my laugh breaking the moment's tension. "I didn't say that." "But you didn't say no either," he countered quietly. The air thickened, not with pressure but with possibility. My pulse picked up. There was a decision hanging there now, right between the three of us. "Maybe we should head out," the first man said at last, his tone softer, more intimate. My stomach dipped. "And go where?" "My place is a short drive from here," he replied. The second leaned in a little, his fingers brushing lightly against my hand on the bar. "Closer than you think," he added, his voice reassuring, not pushy. For a heartbeat, I hovered in that space between caution and desire. The thrill in my chest stung sharp and clear. Then I nodded. We stood together. Their presence flanked me as we walked toward the exit. The cafe behind us, the city outside waiting with its cool night air and endless streets. But my thoughts were already racing ahead, not toward the lights or the route home, but toward what I had silently agreed to step into. Outside, the air was fresh, cool against the heat on my skin. One of them opened the rideshare door with an old-fashioned courtesy that made me exhale. The other slipped into the passenger seat. I took the back, the second man sliding in beside me, the door closing with a muted thud. City lights streaked past like soft ribbons. Neon signs, passing cars, reflections in windows. But all I was aware of was the small space inside the car. His arm rested close to mine, not crowding, but near enough that I could feel his warmth. "You've gone quiet on us," the man beside me said, amusement folded gently into his tone. "Maybe I'm just thinking." I answered. "About what?" asked the one in front, turning slightly so I could see his eyes in the rearview mirror. A faint smile tugged at my lips, but I didn't trust my voice enough to explain. My thoughts were too tangled, moving too fast to pin down in neat words. "You don't have to say anything yet," the man next to me said, leaning closer, his tone soft, steady. "We're here, that's enough." A moment later, I felt a light touch at my wrist from the man in the front seat, reaching back just enough to ground me. It was the smallest contact, but it steadied something inside me. "Still thinking?" The one beside me murmured again, his question threaded with kindness rather than impatience. I gave a breathy little laugh, the tension stretching across my ribs. If I was, I'm not anymore. The driver remained silent the entire ride, as if the car itself had sealed us in and left the rest of the world outside. I lost track of the turns we took, the stops and starts of traffic, even the time passing on the clock. There was only the sound of their voices, the quiet press of their presence around me, the feeling of being watched over from both directions. When the car finally slowed, I blinked, almost surprised that we had already arrived. The ride had slipped past in a haze, anticipation smoothing over the minutes until they barely seemed to exist. The apartment door opened to a hush that made every sound feel amplified. The drift of fabric, the faint click of shoes on wood, the soft thump of the door closing behind us. The lighting was low and warm, washing across leather furniture and tidy shelves. It didn't feel like a place meant to impress. It felt like somewhere meant to breathe in. One of them walked toward a small bar set against the wall, reaching for glasses and a bottle. The other stepped behind me, easing my coat off my shoulders with slow, careful motions. His fingers brushed my skin just below my neckline, a fleeting touch but deliberate, steady, and I suddenly remembered every breath I was taking. "Sit," the man with the drink said gently, returning with 3 glasses. He motioned toward the sofa, his eyes inviting, not insistent. I sank down onto the edge of the cushions. My hands shook just enough that the glass made a small clink as I took it from him. One of them settled beside me, his body angled toward mine, his knee close enough to feel. The other leaned against the arm of the sofa, just across from us, his attention fixed on me like nothing else existed in the room. They didn't rush, not with their words, not with their bodies. The man next to me let his hand trail lightly down my forearm, fingers brushing the inside of my wrist before sliding into my palm. He didn't grip, he just held. The other reached forward and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his knuckles passing over my cheek with a touch so light it almost didn't feel real. "You're shaking," he said quietly. "Am I?" I whispered, even though I could feel every tremor. Their nearness wrapped around me, one voice at my side, the other in front of me, their focus joining in the middle where I sat. My chest tightened, my heartbeat climbing toward my throat. "Still curious?" the one across from me asked. His words carried no challenge, just a steady invitation. My mouth opened, but no answer came out. The air felt too thick. There were too many sensations layered on top of each other. He leaned forward slightly, just enough that I could feel the warmth of him, stopping just shy of contact. At the same moment, I felt the other's hand slide to my side, a gentle pressure at my waist, grounding me, letting me know I wasn't alone in the intensity of the moment. "You're here," the man beside me murmured, fingertips drifting back up my arm in a slow, steady line. "That's all that matters." The sofa dipped again as they both shifted closer. One of their knees brushed mine, sending a warmth spiraling up my leg. Fingers slipped into my hair, not tugging, just resting there like an anchor. Another hand continued to hold mine, thumb stroking over my knuckles with quiet assurance. They guided me further back against the cushions, not pushing, simply following the way my body already wanted to move. I found myself between them in a soft V of warmth and space, protected from both sides. One leaned closer to my shoulder, his voice low as he spoke just near my neck. The other dipped his head near my ear. "Breathe," he reminded me gently. It was then that I realized I'd been holding my breath altogether. I pulled in air too quickly, my lungs burning, my chest rising and falling fast. A warm palm settled at the small of my back, steady and strong. Another hand traced slow circles across my abdomen over the thin fabric of my dress, soothing, calming, unthreatening. My head tipped back against the cushions, eyes fluttering closed without my deciding it. I wanted to keep track of who was touching me where, which voice belonged to which breath, but the lines began to blur too quickly. All I could feel was a wave of warmth building over and over, each gentle touch overlapping the last until I couldn't separate them. Their pace never snapped into urgency. It was all deliberate and patient. A hand at my back, another on my hand, a thumb at my chin, fingers in my hair. Every contact layered slowly, each one asking silently, "Are you still with us?" "You feel it now, don't you?" one of them asked, his voice steady and sure. I nodded, unable to shape any kind of response beyond that. "Yes," I managed, my voice barely more than air. The closeness pressed inward from both sides, warm, controlled, unwavering. It didn't feel like being cornered. It felt like being supported. Each touch, each word, each quiet inhale of theirs answered by one of mine. And in the middle of all that, of my racing heart and their steady, practiced calm, I understood something I hadn't been able to name before. I had convinced myself that I only wanted to know what it was like to be truly understood by one older man. One person with enough life behind him to move carefully, to listen, to guide me without rushing. But here, held steadily by two men who moved in tune with each other, who left no part of me untouched by focus or reassurance, I realized that my curiosity had never been as small as I'd tried to pretend. What I had wanted was this: to be surrounded by experience. To be in the center of a presence that knew how to take its time. To be with people who could sense when to lead, and when to simply hold still and let me breathe. The night stretched on wide and unhurried, and somewhere in those slow, overlapping moments, something in me quietly unlocked. That night wasn't about chasing shock or ticking off a secret fantasy list. It was about finally understanding what it meant to open up in front of people who knew what to do with that vulnerability. Men who treated my body and my feelings like something to be handled with care, not conquered. And when the room grew still again, when the city's distant hum drifted faintly through the window, and we were all just breathing in rhythm, I knew my life had quietly shifted. Not in a way that would show on the outside, but inside, in the way I would choose from that point on. I finally understood the difference between being wanted and being deeply, attentively regarded, between being taken and being guided. So now I'm going to ask you something. If it had been you in that room, with that kind of responsibility in your hands, would you have stayed calm enough to guide someone through that kind of experience? Or would you have stepped back and let someone more practiced take the lead? Be honest with yourself. And if you're brave enough, be honest in the comments. I read every single one. If this story drew you in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's so much more I'm ready to share.